Your teeth close on something that does not want to be eaten. It is leather. It was a boot 3 days ago. You boiled it in ditch water until the stitching came apart and the sole went soft as fat. And now you are working it between your molars like a dog with a knot of rope. And you are grateful, because grateful is what is left. The road smells of hot dust and horse, of unwashed men and wool that has not dried since Hungary, of the sweet rotten thing somebody left in the grass behind you and nobody went back for. And under all of it, faint, carried on the same wind that carries the flies, there is fat. Fat dripping onto fire. Somewhere ahead of you, up where the tents are, meat is cooking. You do not look up. You have learned to spend your attention the way you spend everything else, which is carefully, and only on what can be eaten. You are not a soldier. Understand that first, because everything else on this road follows from it. You have no mail shirt, you have no helmet, you have no horse, no shield, no sword that a smith would call a sword. What you have is a knife with a blade worn thin from sharpening, a wooden bowl, a wool cloak that is also your blanket, and also your tent, and also, on the bad nights, your shroud, and a cross of red cloth sewn onto your shoulder by a woman who is 900 miles behind you, and who you will not see again. You are what the chroniclers will call the poor, when they bother to count you at all. They will not bother often. The column you are walking in is not an army. That is the first lie you would have to unlearn if you had the time, and you do not have the time. The column is a city that walks. It has a butcher and a whore and a priest and a thief, and a man who mends shoes and a man who steals the shoes he was given to mend. It has families. It has grandmothers. It has carts loaded with furniture that no one will ever set down in a room again, dragged east because leaving it behind felt like admitting something. And in this walking city, you live on the ground. There is a shape to it, the same shape every city has. At the front, where the dust has not yet been chewed into powder by 10,000 feet, ride the men with horses. Behind them, the men with mail. Behind them, the men with spears and no mail. Behind them, the servants of the men with spears. Behind them, the carts. Behind the carts, the people who own nothing but the direction they are pointed in. Behind them, you. The order of the column is the order of the world laid out flat on a road so that anyone can read it. Nobody had to write it down. Nobody had to enforce it. It arranged itself, the way water arranges itself, by weight. Your feet went first. Somewhere near Belgrade, the track turned to sharp shale. Your sandals came apart, and you walked the rest of that day on skin. The skin split. The split filled with grit. The grit stayed. Now there is a rim of hardened black around each heel that does not hurt anymore, and you have stopped thinking of it as an injury and started thinking of it as a part of you, the way you think of a fingernail. Your teeth are going next. 2 are loose in the front. You test them with your tongue at night, gently, the way you would test a plank over a well, and every night they move a little further. Your gums have gone soft and sweet with blood. When you spit, the spit is pink. Your stomach has learned to be quiet. That is the strange part. In the first weeks it screamed. It nodded and turned and woke you at night with a sound like a door being dragged across stone. Now it says nothing. It has understood the situation. It has stopped making requests. That silence is not peace. It is a body deciding which parts of itself it can afford to keep. Ahead of you, the road climbs a low rise, and on the rise, catching the last of the light, there are tents. Not many, perhaps 30, in the good cloth, in colors that cost money to make and more money to keep. Red. A deep blue that out here looks like something cut out of the sky and dropped in the dirt. Banners hanging slack, horses picketed in a line, and boys walking the line with buckets, and the horses drinking clean water while you watch and think a thought you would not say out loud. The tents are where the lords are. Between you and the tents there is nothing. No wall, no gate, no guard turning you back. You could walk up there right now. Nothing physical prevents it, and you will not, and neither will anyone around you. And that is the most efficient wall ever built, the kind that does not need stone, because it has been put inside the people it keeps out. You know what you are. You know where the ground is. So you sit where you are, in the dust, with the boiled boot in your hands, and you eat it while the smell of their dinner comes down the slope to you like weather. Go up the slope, not with your body. Your body stays in the dust. Go up with the part of you that still wonders. Inside the largest tent, the ground has been swept. Somebody was told to take a bundle of twigs and clear the stones and the dung and the dead grass out of a rectangle of Anatolian dirt, so that a man could stand on it without feeling the country underneath. Over the swept ground, a rug. Over the rug, a table. The table is not a table. It is 4 war chests set on their ends, with boards laid across them, which is what you use when you have crossed 2,000 miles and still refuse to eat standing up. Over the boards, cloth, white cloth. It has been washed. On this road, a piece of white cloth is a sentence spoken very loudly, and the sentence is that this man has water to spare, and hands to spare, and time to spare, and you have none of the 3. On the cloth, bread. Look at the bread. You will not get another chance. It is white. Not gray, not brown, not the dense sour brick that everyone else in the column calls bread when they are lucky enough to be lying. White, because the flour was sifted through cloth, twice, to take the bran out, and taking the bran out means throwing away nearly 1/3 of the grain, and throwing away nearly 1/3 of the grain is the loudest thing a person can do in a famine. The crust has shattered where the servant tore it. Steam is still coming out of the tear. Next to the bread, salt meat, pork, packed in a barrel in Provence, layered in salt so hard it had to be soaked overnight before it would give up its shape. It is not fresh. It is not fine. Any lord at home would push it away. Here it is, a small fortune with a rope around it, hauled 2,000 miles on the backs of animals that were fed to carry it, and the man about to eat it will complain about the taste. Next to the meat, wine, in a leather bottle that has its own leather case. It has gone half to vinegar in the heat, and it will be cut with water from a cask that has been guarded since Constantinople. And standing at the corner of the table there is a boy, perhaps 16, in a tunic cleaner than anything you have touched since spring. His job is to eat first. Watch him do it. He takes a piece of the bread. He takes a strip of the meat. He puts them in his mouth in front of everyone, and he chews, and he swallows, and then he stands very still and waits. And the men at the table watch his face, the way you would watch a candle in a mine. He is checking for poison. Think about what that means. Up here, food is so valuable, and the man eating it is so valuable, that the possibility of someone paying to kill him through his own dinner is real enough to keep a boy on staff for it. Up here, the danger of eating is that someone might want you dead. 30 paces down the slope, nobody tests anything. Nobody guards anything. Nobody would waste poison on you. The danger of eating, where you are, is the food itself, and it does not need help. That is the abyss, not the bread. The boy. The Lord sits. He sits on a folding stool that a servant carried across a continent for the sole purpose of keeping him off the ground, and having sat, he takes out his own knife from his own sheath, cuts his own portion, and lays it on his own plate. A knife, a sheath, a plate. 3 objects that are only his. Down where you are, there is 1 knife for 4 men, and it belongs to whoever is holding it, and there are no plates at all. And the concept of a portion is a joke told by people who have never seen 40 hands go into 1 pot. He eats without hurry. That is the last thing, and it is the thing that would break you if you saw it. He talks between mouthfuls. He leaves food on the board. He leaves food on the board, and the leaving is not an accident. It is a demonstration, because a man who finishes everything in front of him is a man who was hungry, and being seen hungry is worse for him than being seen cruel. The bones go out the back of the tent. They are thrown, not placed. And that is where your part of the story starts, because the bones are the only thing on that table that will ever reach you, and there are already men waiting for them in the dark. If you want to keep seeing history from down here, at the level of the ditch instead of the throne, subscribe. There is a great deal more of it, and almost none of it made it into the paintings. Come back down. The air changes on the way it changes when you step out of a house into a yard where animals are kept. Here is what you eat. You eat leather, belts first, because a belt is thinner and gives up faster, then straps, then bags, then the boots. You cut it into strips the width of a finger. You boil it as long as you have fuel, and fuel is its own hunt, because every stick within a mile of a column of 30,000 people was gone before you got there. What comes out of the pot is not food. It has no nourishment in it worth the word, but it is warm, and it takes a long time to chew. And a long time to chew is the closest thing to a meal that this road sells. You eat bark, not the rough outside. The pale wet layer underneath, scraped off in ribbons and boiled down to a slime that tastes of green and dirt. You eat grass, openly, at first with shame, and then without it. And nobody laughs, because everyone knows they will be crouching in that same ditch within a week. You eat the bones, the ones thrown out the back of the tent. There is a system to a bone. First it is stripped of whatever thread of meat the knife missed. Then it is passed to the next man, who scrapes it with his teeth for the film that is left. Then to the next, who cracks it, if he has a stone and the strength, for the marrow. Then the pieces are boiled. Then the pieces are boiled again. A bone can feed 6 men in descending order of how little each of them matters, and every man in the line knows exactly which number he is. Even hunger has ranks here. You eat the horses, not the good ones, the ones that fell. A horse goes down with a leg gone wrong, and by the time the sun has moved the width of a hand, there is nothing left on that road but a stain and a skull, and a great many people walking away chewing. There is no butchering. There is a crowd and knives, and a sound you will not forget. You eat what the animals leave. Grain spills when it is loaded. Grain passes through a horse almost whole when the horse is fed too fast. And there are men on this road who follow the horse lines with a stick and a bowl, and nobody says anything to them, because saying something would mean deciding you are better, and nobody has the surplus for that. And you eat dirt, not on purpose. Flour is stretched. Whoever is selling it stretches it, with chalk, with sawdust, with sand, with plain ground earth, because a sack that has been made heavier is a sack that has been made more expensive, and there is no one on this road to complain to. So you eat the earth of 4 countries, a little at a time, and it grinds your teeth flat from the inside while it hollows you out. Up the slope, a boy is chewing bread to prove it will not kill anyone. Down here, you eat what would kill you, and you keep the knowledge to yourself, because to say it out loud would be to admit that you are eating it. Now the water. There is a jar in the tent. Clay, wrapped in wet cloth to keep it cool by evaporation, filled from a cask, and the cask was filled from a spring that a servant walked to and carried back from, and before it went in the cask it was strained through linen. When the Lord is thirsty, a hand pours for him, and he does not think about it. He has not thought about water since the day he left home. That is what wealth is on a march, not gold. Gold is heavy and buys nothing in a valley where no one is selling. Wealth is not having to think about water. You think about water all day. You read the land ahead for the darker green, that means a low place. You listen, you watch the birds. You watch which way the men in front of you turn their heads, because a man who has just seen water turns his head. And in the afternoon of a long day you find some, and it is a hoofprint. The column has passed. Thousands of animals have passed. The ground here was soft in the morning, and the hooves cut it into a field of little basins. And in the bottom of each basin there is water, brown, still, with a skin on it. with the dung of the animal that made the hole sitting at the edge of it half dissolved. You look at it for a long moment. This is the only real decision you will make today. Everything else is walking. This is a choice, with two sides, and you understand both of them perfectly well. If you drink, you may be emptying yourself out on the roadside in 3 days, and emptying yourself out on this road is a death sentence with a delay on it, because the column does not stop, and a man who cannot walk is a man who is now alone. If you do not drink, you will be walking tomorrow in that heat with a tongue like a piece of wood, and the day after that you will not be walking. You get down on your knees. You put your face close. You pull the skin back with 2 fingers, gently, so as not to stir what is underneath, and you drink from the print of a cow. More people die of that water than of any Turk. Nobody will write that down. It is not a story anyone wants. Dysentery does not make a song. But go through the column at night and listen, and what you hear is not weeping, and it is not prayer. It is the sound of a great many people who cannot keep anything inside them, and the smell that comes with it stays over the camp like a lid. And here is the part that will sit in your chest. They know. Up there, they know. Any lord who has campaigned knows what bad water does to a body of men, knows it takes more soldiers than a battle, and knows the way you avoid it is to send men ahead to find clean water and carry it back, and that costs animals and time and money. They do it for themselves. They do it for the horses. The horses are worth more than you are, and it is not close. And no one on this road would even argue the point, and neither would you, because a horse can carry a knight, and a knight can take a town, and you can carry a sack. The horses drink from buckets. You drink from the hole a horse made. Tell me in the comments how many days you think you would have held out before you knelt down to that puddle. Be honest. Almost everyone says 3. Now, before this goes further, let us take something apart. Because there is a picture in your head of what this column looks like, and that picture is wrong, and the wrongness of it is the reason nobody remembers you. The picture is a line of knights. Clean mail, a red cross on a white surcoat. Horsemen riding in good order toward a horizon with a city on it. Banners, discipline, purpose. Almost none of that is what was on this road. The men who could afford a war horse, a mail shirt, a helmet, a lance, a sword, a shield, a spare horse, and the servants, to keep all of it moving, were a sliver. A knight was a small fortune with legs. The horse alone was worth more than a peasant family would see pass through their hands across an entire lifetime, and it needed grain, not grass, which means it needed to be fed food that people could have eaten. The rest of the column, the great heaving majority of it, was you. Farmers, weavers, widows, men who had been in debt and heard that the debt would be forgiven if they went, men who had been told, in a square, by a man on a platform, that walking east would wash off everything they had ever done, and who had things they very badly wanted washed off. Old men who would not see the next winter anywhere and chose to not see it here. Whole families with a cart and a goat and a fixed and burning idea. No training, no weapon beyond the tool they worked with. In place of a map, a conviction that the road went east, and God would handle the rest. Some of them, when they came to a large town, asked if this was Jerusalem. That is not a joke about how stupid they were. Their entire lives had happened within a day of where they were born, and after 1,000 miles, a large stone town looks the way the end of the world ought to look. So the shape is not an army with some poor people attached. The shape is an enormous, ragged, starving migration, with a small armored elite riding in front of it. And the elite ate like the elite, and the migration ate the boots. And there is one more piece to it that makes it worse, and you feel it every single day. You are the reason the food runs out, not the knights. 30,000 mouths strip a valley the way fire strips a field. He rides at the head of a starving multitude he did not want, cannot feed, cannot send home, and cannot use. And he sees you as weather. Bad weather that follows him and eats his supply line. You did not come to be useful. You came to be saved. And on this road, that is the most expensive thing a person can be. The market finds you before you find it. Wherever the column halts for more than a night, a market grows out of the ground like mold. Locals come from villages that saw the dust 3 days ago and have been arguing ever since about whether to run or to sell. Bread, mostly. Cheese. A goat. Barley. They set it down at the edge of the camp and watch 30,000 hollow faces come toward them, and they name a price. The price is not a price. The price is a measurement of how badly you want to live. A loaf that was worth a coin at home is worth 20 here in the morning and 40 by the afternoon, because the sellers can see, and what they can see is that the buyers are not choosing between bread and something else. They are choosing between bread and their own bodies. There is no ceiling on that. There has never been a ceiling on that. The lords buy. They buy in bulk, early, through a steward, with silver counted out of a locked box, and they buy the good grain and the whole animals and the barrels. And what is left when they are done is the thin end of it at the fat end of the price. Then you step up. You have no silver. So you sell. First the small things, and it feels almost clever, because you tell yourself you are being sensible. A spare shirt, a cooking pot, a comb, a buckle, a little knife that was your father's, which goes in the 3rd week for less than it is worth, to a man who does not ask where it came from. Then the useful things, and now it is not clever anymore. The blanket. It gets cold at night in these hills, colder than anyone from a green country expects, and you sell the blanket anyway, because cold happens later, and hunger is happening now. And the whole logic of this road is that later is a country you may not reach. Then the cart, if you had one. Then the animal that pulled it. Then the things that are not things. Women who came east with husbands and came out of a bad month without them, attach themselves to a man with food, and there is an ugly word for that arrangement, and there is also the ditch. Daughters are married off on a roadside to men nobody vetted in exchange for a sack of barley, by fathers who will not be able to look at that sack while it is being eaten. Men sell themselves. They walk up to a lord's steward and offer their labor for the rest of the campaign for bread, and the steward looks them over the way you look over a shovel, and takes some of them, and the ones he takes are the lucky ones. That is the market on the road to Jerusalem. That is what the holy war looks like at the height of a man's chest. Every coin on this road moves in the same direction. The peasant sells his blanket to eat. The Lord buys the grain that would have fed 40 families and feeds it to 30 horses. The road east turns the property of the poor into the comfort of the rich, and it runs on faith, and the faith is genuine, which is what makes it unbearable. You still believe, by the way. Do not let anyone tell you that hunger burns it out. It does not. It sharpens it. When you have sold everything you own and eaten your own boots for a cause, the cause had better be true, because if it is not true, then you are simply a person who threw away his life on a rumor. So you believe harder than the Lord does. You have paid more for it. He prays because it is expected. You pray because it is all that is left in the pack. At night the 2 prayers go up from the same field. His is said in a tent, kneeling on a rug, with a priest who was paid to be there, and a hot meal an hour behind him. Yours is said flat on your back in the dirt, with your arms wrapped around your own ribs to hold the heat in, and you can feel your ribs through the cloak, and they feel like the frame of something that used to be a house. Same words. Same God, presumably, since that is the entire premise. And if God is sorting these 2 prayers by volume, by sincerity, by the price paid to say them, then yours should arrive first by a distance no horse could cover. You will not find out on this road. If this is the version of the Crusades nobody ever put in front of you, leave a like. It is the only thing that keeps this kind of history moving. Then the column stops. There is a city in the way. It is called Antioch. Its walls go up the side of a mountain, and no one is going around it. So the walking city sits down outside the stone city. Winter comes over both of them, and everything you have learned so far gets worse in a way you did not know was available. A moving column eats the land it passes through. A stopped column eats the land it is sitting on, and then there is no more land. The first month, foraging parties go out a day's ride. By the third, men go out and do not come back, and nobody can tell whether they were killed or whether they simply kept walking. And the answer stops mattering, because either way there is one fewer mouth. The rain starts. It does not stop for weeks. The camp is on low ground, because the high ground is where the tents are, and low ground in rain becomes a single continuous wound of mud that swallows a foot to the ankle and holds it there. Nothing dries, not cloth, not wood, not skin. You sleep wet, you wake wet. The cold goes into your bones and settles there like a tenant. A loaf goes for what a house was worth. Whatever you had left to sell, you sold in the autumn. Now you have nothing to trade, and there is nothing to trade for. Men eat things that have no name for eating. The dogs go. The rats are hunted with real seriousness by men who take it up as a profession, and a fat rat is a genuine prize. Then things worse than rats, and the men who wrote down that winter wrote it in very short sentences and moved on. The line people believe is fixed is not fixed. It is a function of how long it has been since anyone ate. That is all it has ever been. And then, in the deep of it, the horses start dying. This is the part to watch, because for the first time the abyss moves. A knight's warhorse eats grain. Grain has to be carried or bought, and there is neither. So the horses go thin, and then they go down. And by midwinter, an army that rode out of Europe on thousands of animals has a few hundred left standing, and men who defined themselves by being mounted are standing in mud, in ruined boots, like everyone else. Some of them eat their own horses. Understand what that costs a man like that. It is not a meal, it is the sale of his entire self. The horse was the reason he was a lord, and not a man with a stick. And you would think, watching it, that the distance closes. That hunger flattens everyone into the same shape. That is the comfortable idea. It is not what happens. Because when the last of the food is gathered up, it is still gathered up in the same order. The lords eat first, and less than they did, and they complain about it, and they survive. Their servants eat second, their soldiers third. And you are still where you have been since Hungary, at the end of a line that runs out of things 200 men before it reaches you. The gap did not close. The whole thing sank together, and the bottom of it went underwater first. That is the lesson of that winter, and nobody says it out loud. Hardship does not level a hierarchy, it clarifies it. When there is plenty, the difference between the tent and the ditch looks like manners, like taste, like a matter of quality. When there is nothing, the difference is who is alive in the spring. By the time Antioch falls and the column stands up again to walk the last of the road, more than half of the people who left home are not walking anywhere. They are in the mud outside those walls, in trenches dug by men too weak to dig them properly, under a layer of earth that the next rain will move. Nobody counted them. There was no one whose job that was. And then, on a morning in early summer, 3 years after a man in a square told you that walking east would make you clean, you come over a rise, and the city is there. It is smaller than you expected. That is the first thought, and you are ashamed of it immediately. It sits on its hills in a hard white light, walled, ordinary, real, and it does not glow, and nothing in the air changes. And the birds go on doing what birds do. Around you, men fall down. They put their faces in the dust and make a sound that is not language. Some of them have carried the idea of this hill in their heads for 1,000 days. Some of them buried a wife to get here. You are one of the people still standing, and what you are doing is a piece of arithmetic you cannot switch off. You are counting who is left. The man who walked out of your own valley beside you is not here. He went into the mud at Antioch. The family with the cart is not here, and you never asked, you simply stopped seeing them somewhere in Anatolia. The old man who told stories at night is not here. The woman who gave you bread once, for no reason, in Hungary when you were still a person who could be surprised by kindness, is not here. Out of every 100 who left, something like 2 out of 10 are on this road. Nobody knows the real number. Nobody ever will. And you look down at your own hands, and they are not the hands you left with. The fingers have gone long because the flesh around them went somewhere else. Your gums have receded off your teeth. There is a shape to your ribs that a healthy man does not have. You are 26 years old, and you move like your grandfather did. The body that arrived is not the body that set out. Something was taken to pay for this hill, and it was taken out of you in 3 years of small daily installments, and nobody signed for it. At the front of the column, the banners are being unrolled. The lords are being helped down off the few remaining horses. A table will be set up before nightfall on a swept piece of ground, under good cloth, and there will be bread on it that came out of the last cart, and a boy will taste it first, to be sure that nothing in this city wants that particular man dead. You will eat what you have eaten since Hungary. That is the thing about a road like this. It moves everybody the same distance, and it does not move anybody an inch. You crossed a continent, and you starved, and you buried your friends, and you arrived, and the order of the column on the last morning is exactly the order it had on the first. Hunger did not take from the top and give to the bottom. Hunger went down the line, in order, politely, and took everything from the people who had the least to give, and left the man at the head of the table, complaining about the salt. Bread rises in the same oven for everyone. It is the walk to the table that decides who is a man and who is a mouth. There are other roads like this one, in other centuries, with the same table at the front of the column and the same ditch behind it. They are waiting on this channel, whenever you are ready to walk one.